Email feels ordinary, routine, harmless, boring even. But email is not just communication, it is your password reset mechanism, your executive command channel, your financial approval pipeline, your company's memory. And here's the uncomfortable truth that email was never designed to be secure. It was built in the early days of internet when networks were small, trusted, and academic, saying that there was no ransomware gangs, no phishing kits, no AI generated impersonation. Yet today, email remains the number one initial access vector for breaches worldwide. So today we're going to do two things. We're going to discuss email security broadly and into perspectives. The first one to understand the attacks, the second one to understand the defenses. Because once you understand both, you stop reacting and start designing securely. So part one, attacks on email systems and their protocols. So I'd want to start by saying email attacks fall into three broad categories. Number one, we have the human exploitation, protocol exploitation, and post compromise abuse. So let's have a look at human human exploitation, or commonly known social engineering. Here, attackers don't always attack systems. They hack the human mind, they hack the people. And we begin by the first type of social engineering that is common when it comes to email compromise. So that is phishing is where now deceptive emails that trick users into entering credentials or performing a certain action like downloading a file or clicking malicious links are meted out on innocent employees or users. And after executing that task that preys on urgency or the impatient nature of human beings, then immediately you have begun an exploitation. You have actually delivered an attack payload on your system or your network. So that's phishing, where an attack is delivered via the email. And then we can now go to a more specific forms of phishing as we interrogate this particular issue. So the other form of social engineering is spear phishing. This is where highly targeted messages are crafted for specific individuals. Then we have whaling. Whaling in itself is where is phishing that targets executive level users. Then let's go to to the fourth form of social engineering when it comes to email, and that is business email compromise. So an attacker gains access into the real mailbox and sends legitimate looking financial requests. So here there's no malware, there's no exploits, just trust abuse. Uh, the other form of attack is thread hijacking. So in this particular case, the attacker inserts themselves into the existing email conversation after compromising an account. So that makes an attack inherit some credibility. This is devastating because it looks completely normal. So those are some of the forms of social engineering or attacks that focus on the human mind that are perpetuated using email as a vector. Then we said we have another category of email attacks, and that is protocol exploitation. Now, this is a bit technical. This preys on the structural nature of emails. What kind of mechanisms does email use for its ends for communication? So, protocol exploitation. Now, we're talking about something deeper. Email core protocols are SMTP, POP3, IMAP, we, that were not designed with security in mind. So the first attack in this regard is email spoofing, where SMTP does not verify the from address by default. Anyone can claim to be anyone, basically. So the other one is Then we are talking about lack of native encryption is another form of protocol abuse or attack. Originally, emails traveled in plain text. Anyone on the path could read it. That is the major cause. Then we're talking about uh, star TLS downgrade attacks. Here, attackers strip down the encryption, negotiation, and force plain text transmission. Therefore, all the security that you had inherently tried to create via encryption becomes negated. Then the third protocol based attack is man in the middle. So here, if a TLS is not enforced, attackers can intercept and modify messages in transit. These are the architectural weaknesses and not bugs that can be attributed to email attacks. So let's go to the third form of attacks when it comes to email security, and that is authentication and identity. So email is the identity backbone of most organizations. Let me repeat that. Email is the identity backbone of most organizations. In fact, if you stripped away the part that is before the at, that is the identity of that particular user, especially where you have managed identity in an organization. Then you find that the part that is before at, that name, it's actually the identity of the human being. And then the part after that is the domain of that particular organization. So authentication and identity attacks prey on this aspect. So compromise compromise email and you control password resets, you control OAuth approvals, you control executive communication. Attacks include credential phishing, password spraying, multi-factor authentication, fatigue attacks. We have previously talked about this. And finally, OAuth token theft. So modern breaches are rarely SMTP exploits. They are identity failures. Then let's look at malware and payload delivery. So here, an email remains the most common delivery mechanism. So here you have macro-enabled documents that can harbor malicious instructions that could affect either your documents or compromise your machines. Then we have malicious PDFs, zip archives, and embedded HTML exploits. Then we have drive-by. So let's talk about malware and payload delivery. So here, email remains the most common malware delivery mechanisms, and we are talking about macro-enabled documents, malicious PDFs, zip archives, embedded HTML exploits, and drive-by links. So if a user clicks, the endpoint becomes the benchhead or becomes the bedrock of an attack. So whether it's your phone, whether it's your PC, then that malicious email, that malicious file or resource that you have just downloaded, you'd be lucky if it was not a worm which can self-propagate across a network. Yeah, if it is a virus, then if you connected your mobile phone with your PC, the highly likelihood when you transfer any files from your phone to your PC, you're likely to compromise your PC and therefore perpetuate that malware along the wire. So let's talk about the other form of attacks, which is infrastructure and DNS attacks. So emails rely heavily on DNS. We are talking about the MX records. We are talking about SPF keys and DKIM public keys. We will explain what that is. If an attacker manipulates the domain name service or server, they can redirect the mail flow, they can bypass any protection, they can impersonate domains, essentially spoofing a domain. Even bounce behaviors can be abused, creating backscatter flags. This is where someone uses multiple spoofed email addresses, and then they send emails that they know will bounce. So out of 1,000 emails that are sent from these spoofed or impersonated domains, then you all of a sudden you are getting traffic from bounced back emails, and we will speak about countermeasures for that. So email is a distributed trust system, and distributed trust is fragile, and that is evidenced by backscatter floods. So let's pivot and discuss defensive controls, how they work, and what they stop. Because understanding attacks without understanding controls may lead to fear. Understanding both leads to an architecture that is well grounded on defense. So, email defense is layered. No single control is sufficient. We begin by SPF, or Sender Policy Framework. So, these are servers allowed to send emails from a particular domain. Receiving servers compare the sending IP against that list. It mitigates basic spoofing, backscatter attacks, some phishing impersonation. But SPF alone is not enough. Let's look at DKIM, or Domain Key Identified Mail. Domain Keys Identified Mail. So here, outgoing mail is cryptographically signed. If receiving server verifies integrity using a public key stored in the DNS, then that is a valid email from a valid originator or sender. If the message is altered in transit, the signature breaks. So DKIM therefore mitigates message tampering, some spoofing, or man in the middle modification. The other kind of defense is DMARC, policy enforcement. So DMARC builds on SPF and DKIM. So it enforces alignment between the visible sender and authenticated domain. It allows you to set the policy to either none, quarantined, or reject. And we will see why setting the policy of DMARC as reject can save you a lot. So when you set the policy to reject, spoofed messages never reach your inboxes. So therefore, DMARC mitigates against domain spoofing, brand impersonation, internal domain, business email compromise attempts. Let's look at encryption, and with the respect of TLS and MTA STS. So TLS encrypts mail in transit. MTA STS ensures that encryption cannot be downgraded. So these controls mitigate interception, passive surveillance, start TLS stripping, and man in the middle attacks. Let's look at another defense, which is secure email gateways. So these systems inspect inbound mail for malicious links, suspicious attachments, impersonation patterns, reputational indicators. So if a particular domain is known for phishing campaigns, then that reputation is used against a defense, against that kind of phishing campaign. So those emails are rejected even before there's a handshake. And I would say, even if you didn't do a lot in terms of controls, then business, an email gateway, a secure email gateway is critical. So we've said a secure email gateway will inspect inbound mail for malicious links, suspicious attachments, impersonation patterns, and reputational indicators. So essentially, they mitigate phishing, spear phishing, malware delivery, and spam campaigns. But filtering is probabilistic. It reduces the risk, but it does not eliminate it. And therefore, a concerted effort among all those efforts that we have spoken should be pursued by the defense team within an organization. The cybersecurity team that is known as a blue team, or the proactive team that acts before uh, your vulnerabilities are exploited, should look into that matter with regards to the importance of an email in an organization. So then let's look at the other defense mechanism, which is multi-factor authentication. Traditional MFA based on SMS or OTP apps reduce password attacks, but it is still phishable. Attackers can proxy login pages, relay codes in real time, which brings us to the gold standard, phishing resistant MFA. And I know we have talked about this. And here we are looking at methodologies or techniques such as FreeDO2 or Web or AuthN. So instead of shared secrets, these use cryptographic key pairs. The private key never leaves the device. Authentication is bound to the website's domain. If a user lands on a fake site, the key simply will not sign the challenge. No code to type, no push to approve, no secret to steal. So, phishing resistant MFA mitigates against credential phishing, MFA fatigue, real time proxy attacks, account takeover, OAuth abuse. So, this is the strongest widely deployable control today. Then let's look at another defense mechanism, and that is conditional access and zero trust. Access decisions are made based on the device health, location, risk signal, and behavioral anomaly. So this will mitigate against stolen credential use, suspicious login attempts, legacy authentication abuse, and token replay attacks. Identity becomes continuously evaluated, not just authenticated once. That is the meaning of zero trust. Then let's look at a common practice, best practice, that is keeping logs, logging, and monitoring. So this prevention is powerful. Detection is said to be essential. So monitoring will help you in the following areas: mailbox rule creation, external forwarding, or auth app registration, logging anomalies, tracking. So this mitigates through rapid response, persistence, threat hijacking, supply chain abuse, and financial fraud. To conclude, the strategic reality is most catastrophic email breaches today are not due to protocol flaws. They are due to weak identity controls, weak multi-factor authentication, legacy authentication enabled, no monitoring, poor policy enforcement. Email security is not just filtering, it's identity security. So, as we end this, email is not just a communication, it is authority, it is trust, it is access. When attackers compromise email, they don't just read messages, they impersonate leadership, they redirect messages, they redirect money, they reset passwords, they pivot into cloud infrastructure, they weaponize trust. So next time someone says it's just an email, pause, because email is the front door. And in cybersecurity, the front door is where wars are won or lost. Thank you for watching our episodes. We appreciate you, and we hope you always come out with something that can be beneficial to your security architecture and overall security posture. Has been Gumzo Cybersecurity Podcast. It's always a pleasure. Jambi Francis signing off.